Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Bava Metzia, daf Kuf Gimel. We're going to begin on Kuf Beis and with Beis, about 8 lines from the bottom. Bami named Rabbi Yanai. So he asked the following question: Soicher Omer Nasati. So let's say you have a situation we discussed in yesterday's daf. When it comes to a renter and a lender, there could be a discrepancy when it comes to a chodesh uber, let's say you have an other sheni, a 13th month, who has to pay for that 13th month. So in this continuation of discussion between the renter and the landlord, we ask the following: what happens if the renter said, Nasati, that I already paid you, basically. I already gave you the amount for the rental. Umaskir oimer lo natalti, so that you never paid me. So obviously this is not a good thing. This is, of course, before credit cards and checks and different ways of being able to verify this stuff. So, first of all, Rashi points out this is a sachar shana, so you're renting for the year. So the question is, al mi havi raya, who has to prove that whether payment was given or not? So Amos. So when did this take place? If this whole discrepancy took place in the middle, says Rashi, unlike maybe rentals in modern day, when it comes to those days, rental was only due at the end. So basically you would stay there, let's say, for a year, and you would end up paying for the year. That was the stipulation. And it happens to be this is the end of the year. Now, because of that, we already know the answer to this question, if that would be the situation. Tanina, we already learned that, as Rashi says. What did we learn? So, Ditnan, Mesa Abatoch Shloshim Yoim. Let's say the father died within 30 days. Becheska Shlo Nifta. So we should assume that he was not redeemed. We're talking about a pidyon aben. Shiavaraya Shenifta. So when it comes to an obligation, like for example, redeeming your firstborn child, so we say that if it took place before, if the guy died before 30 days, we're just going to assume that he never did give any money because the chiyuv didn't happen yet. So to over here, if the monies weren't owed, we're just going to assume that he didn't pay. Tanina, we also learned, and this is actually a girsa because the Gemara continues, that none. We're going to assume that he didn't redeem his son. Ad shiaviraya shenifta. He actually has to prove that he actually redeemed his son. On the other hand, so again, the question is, what exactly is the Gemara's question over here? So the question is, it was actually the time that is actually due. Does a person basically pay on that day or not? Says Rashi. So he says, I didn't pay you in the morning. So you didn't pay me in the morning. I say I did pay in the morning. So the question is, what do we assume in that particular situation? Was it paid on that day, like right away, or maybe not? So that's where the day itself is ambiguous, is unclear. So we also learn the answer to this as we continue Kuf Gimel Mad Aleph. When it comes to a sacher, when it comes to a hired labor, someone who is working for you, bismano nishba v'naitel. Again, what happens if there's a question whether or not you paid your worker? So the worker is obviously claiming that you never paid him. So if it was bismano, then nishba v'naitel. He'll make a shvud, he didn't get paid yet, and he'll be able to take. Says Rashi, im b'yoyim shiatzim v'malachto, was the day that he finished his work, tavu nishma shul kibel v'naitel. So you can actually make this shvua, and then he'll be able to take what is owed to him. So, now even though the truth is, we know that typically speaking, you're supposed to make a shvua and not pay. So Rashi says, Mishum debal bayis tarud, So if you have a Baal bias, you have a boss who has 100 workers, he thinks he paid you. He may or may not have paid you. Even though he thinks he paid you, he's not being deceitful. He just may have paid someone else. So therefore, for that reason, we want the actual worker to make a shvuah in order to, because he'll be more confident in his shvuah that he didn't get paid, and then he'll be able to take. So sachahu de ramu rabban shvuah. The only reason why we say this is on the worker, mishum de baal habayis tori b'po'ala, because he's just preoccupied. So therefore, we can't have him make a shvuah. Avol hacha, whatever here, seichem mihim b'shvuah. The renter should be able to make a shvuah. Says Rashi, ba'alma fil b'yom zmano nemon loimer praticha kvar. He should be able to say, I already paid you. So in this situation, it would be a shuas heses. We're not talking about the shua deraisa moed b'mixus, so therefore that should be the case. Okay, so let's look at question 13. Question 13 says as follows. Just get to the right question. Tavo hamaskir b'yoyim b'demashlim zmane v'asaycher tayin shenifra b'boiker. The renter says, I already paid you in the morning. Mahadin umehechin have you b'gemar l'din zeh. So the din is that the soicher, the renter, is believed in a shvuah. So the renter is going to be believed, and therefore the renter will not have to pay. Mid ashkachan sacher, when it comes to a worker, shetay v'scharo b'yom shiatz melachtai. We said that he should be the one who makes the shvuah and get his payment, his paycheck. Mishum de tarad baal bayis hab alma. Otherwise, neman shepara af b'yoyim zmanai. So it's only the baal bayis because he's tarad. Mashma, anyone else who's not tarad should be able to make a shvuah that he did pay. And therefore, that's the reason why the din is that we're going to say he could make this shvuah, the soicher, and therefore we will believe that he paid. Okay, so let's see what I wrote over here. Hu yachol ishava medin poyel. Shehu aimer lo kabalti sachar, I didn't get paid. Babal habayis aimer shalamti kfar, already paid you. Hapoyel yachol ishava mimnei shehabal habayis tareach ve'efshe shehu lo hiskir kolkach im hishlim es hapoyel lo. Varak po amrin and hachi. Avol b'derech klal kamo hacha nemli shava. Okay, interesting way I wrote it. I'll take it. Okay. All right, let's continue. Amar Rabba. Amar Rav Nachman. Haiman de'oiger le'beis l'chavri. So you have a person who leased out a house to his friend le'eser shnin for 10 years, pretty decent amount of time. V'kosav le'shtara, and he wrote a star but it was without a date. There was no date over here. Okay, so in this case, and he says, Nikitas chamishnin, that I took 5 years. So mehimin, the landowner in this case is going to be believed. Says Rashi, the landlord wrote this document that says it's for 10 years, but he didn't write on the star at the time. And after some point, he comes to the basin with this document. And V'omer, says Rashi, Kfar dar tavo chamishanim. This guy's been living in my house for 5 years. Now, there's no date on this document that actually says that's true. The other one says I was only there for 3 years. So Mihim and Bahabayas, says Rashi, the karka bechesas baleo medes, that the land is in the chazaka of the landlord. Al kol davar suffika bolafanenu, regarding any suffix. And this is one of the opinions that we saw in yesterday's daf as well. Never we're going to believe the landlord that he was already there for 5 years, not 3. If you want to tell me that's the case, let's say you lent out 100 zuz and you wrote a star, but if let's say he says, or I paid back half, so are you going to believe him in that case? How can you compare the two? Hasam over there, shtar luguvainakoi. the star's purpose is for collection. If it was that there was collection, on that star it should have said that partial payment was already received. Alternatively, tavra, you should have written as Rashi as a shover. You should have some document verifying that there was some monies that were paid, and therefore in that situation, since there isn't any verification, the star itself or a receipt, we're not going to believe you. The reason why I wrote this, I just don't want you to take a chazak, have like a chazak on this, so that no one should say that you actually own this land. People are going to see that you've been here, like Cheskas Abatim, we'll see pretty soon, that this guy just is going to end up claiming that he's the owner of the land. So at least I want to have a star to show, no, it's just a rental. So therefore, that's the whole purpose of the document. Amar Rav Nachman, Shol Adam Betuvo L'Oilam. If a person borrows something and it was Betuvo, which seemingly, as long as the item is good, then the oilam, then you're able to actually keep this forever. Now, Imra Adam says Rashi Kli L'Chaver. If you see a vessel, Yomer Hashlin Betuvo, you can borrow it for the good. Yermale Hain Shol Oilam, he can keep it forever. Kozman Shuroya Malacha, as long as it's something which still is functional, has utility. Dahai Betuvo Mashma Lon Kozman Shutuvoi. And here's the kicker. Rashi says, "Afil machziro choser v'notel kishiyitzrach." Even if the shoyl gives it back to the mashal, but since it's oilam, the shoyl has full rights to be able to borrow it again at any point that he wants. So that is a tremendous chiddush. But that's because you said it in this language. Amar Rav Mari Bara de Mashmuel. He says it's only behuda kani minei. The only time that'll work is if there was actually a kinyan done. But if there was no kinyan, so once you give it back, then you're not going to be able to get it back. Amar from the Mashal. Amar Rav Mori Bered Rav Ashi Umahadule Kate, and he must return literally the broken pieces, says Rashi. When it becomes depleted, Shlehi Roy, it's no longer fit to use Yasu Shvarav. So again, the whole point is you can borrow it as long as it has this utility. However, once it's no longer of function, so then you have to give me those pieces back. You say to your friend, Oishlan Mora Mirpak Bay Hai Pardesa. Let's say I'm going to lend you this gardening tool for the purposes of using gardening in this vineyard. Now, you said Pardesa Stam, so the din is Rafik Behahu Pardesa. So the din is you can use it for this this vineyard, this orchard. However, you said Pardesa, which is Mashma Pardesa. The first one is Lamiprak Bay High Pardesa. You were specific for this orchard. So therefore, because of that, you can only use that orchard. But if you said Pardesa Stam, which implies more than one orchard, any orchard or orchards, Rafik Bay Kol Pardesa de Boy, you can use any. Pardese, Rafik V'ozo Kol Pardese de Isle, you can use any, you can use it to garden for any of the orchards. Umahadele Kate. However, you do have to return this gardening tool afterwards. Omer Papa Haiman de Omer Lilchabre Oishlan Hai Gargusa. Lend me this Gargusa, which actually before we go into Rashi, let's look at Rashi. Pardese is Loimrin and Trey Pardese who did currently they feel Tuva Nami Mashma. The whole Chiddush is not just one, not just the minimum amount would be two. No, so it could be many orchards. So Gargusas be'er mayim chayim lahashkus sadais, to lend some type of a fountain or a well in order to be able to water fields. So you said, "Can I please lend me this?" V'nafla, and then the fountain caved in, it got ruined. So lo banila. Says Rashi, "Im bo liv noiso." If let's say you reconstruct it, v'loimer oid sha'oli, and you say, borrow it to me. Oilam zem akivlov. You can hold back. V'oimer lo hishalticha el oso v'lo kishinasa acher. So because I was specific to lend you this water well, so therefore if it broke and then it was refixed, it's considered like panim chadashus balakan. It's like considered something new. However, gargusa v'nafla banila. If it was just gargusa, so in that situation, you would, if it was built, then you would be able to get it back. Says Rashi, v'harhi she'ulalo ad shiyashke kol sadoisa, because the way you framed it is that it should be continue to be used until all the fields are watered. Be gargusa, a place for a well. So kariv ozol kama gargute ba'are. So you can continue to go to put this for all the wells for your land, until he can continue until he finds a well. But again, he has to do some form of a kinyan. Let's just look at this Rashi, make sure we understand this. Hashileni bir gargusa, hashileni mokoim, lend me a place lachbor bo, to plow be'er, to make a well. So v'kari v'ozel kama gargusa be'are. So imulo yimsakan yachbor b'makam acher. If it's not here, he can find another place until there's a place proper for a well. However, it says he needs to do a kinyan mikara v'ilu kanamine dibor ba'alma. It's just words, and that won't work. Let's continue with the next Mishnah. It says the Mastisan, Hamaskir Bayis Lavero. So you have again a rental agreement for a house, but the house fell down. So Chayv Hamad Bayis. So the owner must rebuild a new house. Because obviously I'm renting a property and it wasn't my fault the house fell down. So therefore the masker has to rebuild the house. However, you don't have to change the specifications. The Seicher can say, I don't want a big house. It'll cost me so much more the electricity and the like. So I don't want you to make it bigger or smaller. It's got to be the same way it was. Similarly, if let's say it was like a duplex, so it was two houses, you can't just make it into one big house, or vice versa. You can't have less or more windows unless both agree. Says the Gemara. So, what exactly is this mission talking about? So, if let's say he says, I'm renting this house, so then Nafal Ozale says Rashi, Ozdale, Halach lo mazolo. We can say your mazel caused this to happen. If I said, if you rented this house, so as we said before, so if you rebuild something, it's not the same house. So therefore, maybe I'm not obligated to rebuild because it's only this house. This house has fallen down. So idir milei by a stam. If the rental was just stam, so echad ma'ulu yasenu shnayim, katan ma'ulu yasenu gadol. If it's one, why can't you do two? If it's small, why can't it be big? Because if you just said that you have to provide a house, it shouldn't matter what the dimensions are or how big it is and the like. Any house would do. And therefore, it's hard to understand why our Mishnah would say that you can't make it bigger or smaller. So that what happened was the following. We said, buy a shiny masko, the house which I'm renting to you, midas arko kach v'kach. Its measurements are such and such. So therefore, it must be that size as per their agreement. It said on the contract that I'm renting to you an apartment, for example, which has such and such square footage, this many bedrooms, this many baths. So therefore, because you specify in the contract, that's what needs to be provided. So what's the chiddush? Obviously, actually, what happened was bias kizani masklocha. I said a house like this I am renting to you. So it's the same thing. It has to look exactly kazet. We're talking that it's by the river. Says Rashi, Shu Choshev, that it's a very prominent place where it's considered and found. Says Rashi, Shedek when the Adam Makbidim Mekach, some people are precise that they want it near this water. Madatema Maikazed Dekoy Good in the Har Kamashmuan. So maybe he just meant that it's not necessarily the dimensions, but the location. Says Rashi, of ark of Rachbal lo asti behedya. That may have not been specific, just the location. Kamashmuan Tekul Milsakasti. The truth is, it's everything. Not only the location, but also its dimensions. Hanulach HaShoyel, Hanulach HaShoyel, Hanulach HaShoyel. We now are going to continue with the 9th parak, Hamakabel. So Rashi says Hamakabel, O Barisus. So it could be talking about, we're going to see the difference between two different types of sharecroppers. One is called an Aris, in which Lamechs L'Shlish Ravia, says Rashi. What happens is, they work your field, I own the field, and you're my sharecropper. And if it's a very successful crop, we already agreed that you'll get half or a third or a fourth, depending on the deal. And therefore, if you do a lot, you'll get a lot and I'll get a lot. But it all depends on if it's a successful year or not. So if there's, for example, in finance, if there's a strong bottom line, so everyone's going to benefit. Not so strong, no one will not as much benefit. However, b'chachirus is b'kach b'kach kurim l'shana. All the profits go to him, and he pays a set amount for the use of the field. He said, you know what? You must give me $20,000 for using this field, or let's say 20,000 pounds of tomatoes. Now, it could be that maybe more or less than a half or a third or a fourth, and therefore, of course, the notion of charichus is that person, chachirus, is going to probably be more motivated to want to work hard, because he's going to have to pay a certain amount no matter what. So, those are the two differences. So, hamakabel sad b'chavero. So, in either case, mokum shnagul liksor yiksor. If the custom is for them to harvest and maybe leave some of the stuff behind, the roots, then that's what you have to do. Lakor yakor. If the custom in that area is to uproot the whole thing, then that's what you're supposed to do. Then that's what you do. Yakor. Makom shnahugel liksor yiksor. Lakor yakor. Lakor shacharav yachreish. If there's accustomed to plow afterwards again, hakol keminig medina, says Rashi. Achar hakatsir o hakira. Sometimes there may be a requirement to plow after the harvest, kidil hapach shirashim, to uproot the roots, shel atzavim, the grass, atzavim roim, like the weeds. V'yamusu vo yasu yismechu lekishetizara. So when it comes to the next season of planting, there may be, you should harvest, you should plow rather the field to uproot and kill all the weeds, so that'll be better for the next harvest. So again, it all depends on the custom. And then the Mishnah says, Kashem shecholkin betvua, just like they share in the grain, and this, we'll discuss exactly what this is referring to. This is only by an aris, this is also by chachirus. So kacholkin betevin, they also divide the straw. Tevin of Akash. Okay. Ukashem shecholkin beyayin, just so too, if let's say you're dividing up wine. So kacholkin, as we continue to cook Gimel Amid Beis, Bizmayers. You're also the branches that are cut off from the grapevines. Also vakanim, also the supporting poles. The Gemara is going to explain. Rashi says these are kanim hamamidim esagafanim. These are reeds or poles that support the grapevines, so that they're held up properly. So that also has value. Vishneim mesapkin es hakanim, says Rashi. Hachadashim b'chol shana, the new ones every year. Shein el ha'oris el la'avod v'lishmor. His job is to work and to guard the field. Of ashar devarim al shneim. But when it comes to all the other stuff, like certain supplies, so it's something which both of them must do. Save for the Masnisin, says Rashi, Leisa el bekablonos. So Rashi says that this part is only talking about a kablon. Di becharachus, if we're talking about chachranus, lo shaycha chaluka. There's no din of splitting it, because, as we said, chachranus is a set amount up front of cash, let's say. So therefore, these other things are not divided. Says the Gemara. Tana makam shenaga liksor ena rishaya lakor ena rishaya liksor v'shneim makvin zedzeh. Even if, let's say, one wants it uprooted completely, if that's not the custom, can't do it. So liksor ena rishaya lakor. You can't uproot the whole thing. So hayamar, the owner will claim beina de titban liaroi. Maybe the owner will want it uprooted because he's going to say, I'm going to want the straw. However, the sharecropper can say, I don't want to do that. It's extra work. I don't want to have to do that. Let's hold off 1 second. Look at Rashi. Okay, let's go back. So it's possible one guy can say, I want my field completely cleaned. The other one can say, I want the straw. So look at Rashi. Bal karka he may not want it uprooted. So I may have said the other way around, the ratio, that the owner doesn't want it uprooted. So let me say it the other way around. So originally the owner may say, I don't want it uprooted because I want it for straw. In other words, I want it to basically turn into like fertilizer. So don't uproot it. And the other guy may say, no, it's not true. I do want, fine. Okay, so that's one svar. V'haya omer im bal bayis omer akor, he may want it uprooted. Matzi hayla memerle lo matzina mitrach shikatsira noicha min akira. I don't want to have to trouble doing that. Okay, so that's the same idea. To tinaker shtehi nekiya shin esrich lezevel. So it's the other way around. The owner can say, I want you to uproot the whole thing because I want the field cleaned. And the other one will say, no, I don't want it uprooted because I want a straw. Okay. And therefore, I don't want it uprooted. Okay. So again, there's logic that the owner may not want anything on his field because he wants his field clean. The owner may want something on his field, so it's for Zevel. But so therefore, the owner may be interested one way or the other way around. And on the other hand, the worker may say it's extra work. I don't want to have to uproot it. Or he may want he may want it for straw. Okay. Ushneim akven zed so lamuli. Matam karma. Matam lixer in a rishai lakar in a rishai lixer mishum deshneim akven zed zelzeh. It's not really adding anything. It's just the matam. It's explaining the reason. Okay. Lachar shachar biacharish. So if the custom is to plow afterwards, you got to plow. So pshita, obviously, if that's the custom, let's say it's a place where the custom, they don't pull out all the weeds. But this guy went above and he took out the weeds. So as you said, the whole reason for plowing is just to remove the weeds. So you know what? I decided I was just going to rip out the weeds myself in order to avoid having to plow afterwards. So there's no real purpose in me plowing now because there's no weeds there anyway. He should have explained what he was doing. And since he didn't, therefore he'll still have to plow again. Hakol kimeneg medina. Hakol esui mai. What is that coming to include? Esui hadatan rabbanon. Malchus nagel haskir ilanois al gave karka maskirit. So there's a custom in which is the place will rent out the trees together with the land. so then that's part of the rental agreement. Makam shein nahagul haskirin maskirin. So the question is, what is the status when you're dealing with a field? What the status is of the trees? So it goes based on on the minhag makom. Says Rashi, im sada lavan shiyito haaretz chelko beperos ilan avol b'she'eno toireach behen shenin tzrichin la'avoida. Maskirin kolemer mistamahen muskarin. They're still part of the deal. Okay. Malkum shenahagul haskir maskirin. So pshita. Obviously, if the custom is that you get the trees are part of the deal. So lotzricha de kuliyamiyav betilta. Usually, the owner takes a third. The azul ihu v'yayiv beriva. However, here the owner only took a fourth. Now, why did the owner take less? Maybe it's mahadatema diyermele hai debatsri lacha. The reason why I took less instead of the normal third, I'm only asking for a fourth. I didn't want to include the trees. You're not supposed to get the trees. Even though it's true, you're taking less, you should explain that was the reason why you're doing it. So pshita. Normally, everyone gets a quarter, all the owners. And for some reason, this owner is able to get a better deal, a third. Madatema, maybe the sharecropper can say, the reason why I'm giving you instead of a fourth, a third, is because I thought you're going to give me the trees. Again, I should have explained. As we said in Rashi, this is specifically referring to kablanos. So Amar Rav Yosef, in Bavel, Nehigu, the tradition, the custom was lo yehive tivna la'arisa, that they would not give the teven to the aris. There was part of the custom that this was not included. Okay. L'may nafkamina. So why do we need to know this? The inish deyoyev, if someone actually gives it, ayin yafahu. He's just being generous. But that's not the general deal. We don't learn from what this guy did that this is the general custom, but it just means that this is what he did. Amar Rav Yosef, Buchra v'tafta v'arkavta. So all these different. Let me just keep going. V'kani dechizra the bal bias. All these different things which are added to the earth. It's put like as a wall around the ditch. We say that it's upon the Baal bias to be able to provide these things. The owner is required to provide these things. However, the thorns around, that goes to the Baal bias, then the sharecropper is required for this additional protection. Klal Milsa, Kol Iker Balma the Baal bias, that anytime it says on the side, perish yug, listom hapratzais, anything in which is to take care of the regular shmira, and without it, it would not be a functioning field. Then the Baal bias, the owner of the field, had to provide that. However, netiruta yeterta derisa, the aris making extra walls, extra protection, is for his own convenience, so he no longer has to watch over it as much. So therefore, if that's the case, we're going to say in Rashi, he's only doing it to make it easier for himself. With this extra protection, with all these thorns, no animal's going to come around. So that's on him. So basically, the Baal bias has to provide the basics. However, if you want to enhance your protection of the field, then it's on the Aros. Rav Yosef, Mara Uzavila V'Davla V'Zarnuka the Baal bias. These are all basic requirement tools, for like hose and for gardening, as well as pails and for fertilizer. And Zarnuka is a flask. It says Rashi, Davla is a klil hashkosada. So Rashi says Zarnuka is a noid, a flask to fill up the balbais. Again, because these are things in which are necessary for the purposes of the field. The balbais. Arisa avida be yoiri, says Rashi. Alav lasos charitzin, it's upon him to make these etchings, misfasanar, from the edge of the river at sofa sun till the end of the field. Charitzin harbe, shikishidoylin hamayim mehanahar, that when the water comes from the river, shoyvchin b'charitzin, it'll pour into these ditches, these indentations in the ground. The charitzin molichin ad sofa sada, v'yishoysim eleha. So basically, it's upon the oris to have to dig these channels, these water channels, to get into the proper place. Let's look at question 14. Mao klal da milsa di amr b'gemar legabi haitzas shmiras asada im hemal balbayas al shal oris. So this is what he wrote. Iker shmira she'i efsher belohi al balbayas shmira yisera al oris. Very cleanly written. Okay, and is also maybe question TA29. Yes. Al mi motelos hotza shel shmiras asada al balbayas ol oris. So he says again, Iker shmir al balbayas nitirusi yasera yaterta al ha'oris. That's TA29. Okay. All right, let's finish this daf. It says also specifically by a kablon, kashem shecholkin bayayin kacholkin bezemuros v'kanim. So kanim ma'aviditayu. I'm not exactly understanding what is this notion of these kanim, these supporting beams that are holding up this grapevines. What exactly are you saying when you're referring to this? So this, the Gemara says, so Amri de Rabbi Yanai kanim hamuchlokim. Basically, as we explained, they are, says Rashi, shenitla kli pasan machsoif halovin shalehem. So basically, their purpose is to hold up these grapevines. Ushneim misapkin es hakanim, but both of them have to provide these newer, because every year they replace them. So lovely. Why do we need to mention this? So matam kamer, matam shneim cholkin bekanim. Why do they have to both do it? Mishum deshneim misapkin es hakanim. So since they are going to both they're both using these beams. So it says Rashi Pshita kivad detana delishneim mecholkin hein mamelo shamina deshneim misapkin es hachadashim. They use the new ones. Dilu Yomi kara my polig biyashanim. Why would you need new ones if the old ones are still there? Obviously, you're taking the old ones away, and therefore that's what it's coming to explain. Adkan.